ads. We all hate them. They slow down our devices and interrupt us at the worst possible moments. So let's solve that today with Pi-hole. Before we get started, I just want to take a quick second to explain what Pi-hole is and a very basic how it works. So basically when Pi-hole is set up as the main DNS, either for the router or the individual device, it acts as a firewall, blocking DNS requests to malicious sites or malware or ads in this case. You can set those up in the block list, or you can download block list ads, which is really simple really. You just copy and paste a URL of a trusted block list, very important it's trusted, and chuck that on the Pi-hole, and it works really well. All of this happens, the blocking the requests and loading, in less than 30 milliseconds, which is amazing. So if that sounds like a great thing, let's get started. So for today, I'm just going to set up a Linode. You don't need a Linode, obviously you can run on a Raspberry Pi, that's what it's designed for, but it will work on any Linux internet connected device with a little bit of kick. It doesn't have to be crazy. I'm just going to use Debian 10, pretty reliable, just a cheap package, doesn't need much. We'll call it Pi-hole 2 because redundancy. You want to put in a secure root password, or if you're on a Pi, just change the default password. Especially in my case, I'm going to make this public facing to show it works, and it's all good. I'm not going to set up SSH keys, so that's all good. We can hit create, and then it takes about 1 minute if you're going the Linode way, and if you're on the Pi, it'll be immediate once you're set up. So I'll be back in a second. Alright, so as you can see, the Linode is running. We've got the green light, so we're good to go. You don't even need a desktop connection at all. It's perfectly fine around the console, so I'll just copy this SSH access and open up a terminal and just copy and paste. It's as simple as that. It's going to ask you if you want to verify the key or the fingerprint, I like that, and then you'll enter your password, or if you're on a Pi, you're probably automatically logged in. It's pretty simple. As long as you know how to get into your system, it's pretty straightforward. Just a few differences between them. It's really simple now. You just want to run a quick update, make sure everything's good to go, especially if you've just freshened up your install. And not that this is a big issue, but sometimes if you're getting weird certificate issues, type in date and check that the time is good. So that's the time in UTC. Yep, that would be the time. So that's all good. There's nothing wrong there, because certificates expire, and if they've expired because your time's set wrong, they can't help you. So now you can either scroll over to the website here, and at the top you get install. You can do Docker, but I'm just going to do the bash script because it's easier. Basically just hit install Pi-hole. You're going to bring up this one-step automated install, which you can copy and paste. If you are very security minded, you can just copy that, and it'll show you what it's going to do before it pipes it to bash. I've done this like 1700 times at this point, so I trust it. So then we can scroll over to a new terminal, or the one with, make sure it's the one with the Pi, or Linode. It's very confusing. So it's checked for the root user, and it's going to do updates and install packages if they're not already there. And here we go. Automated install. It really is quite simple once you get to this point. You do need to read carefully, as some of the questions are different, and depending on how you're setting it up, you'll have to change it accordingly. So perfect. It is free, powered by donations. So open source software. It's great. If you want to contribute to it, go to the GitHub. It is a server, so it does require static IP, which you can either set up on here or on your router. I highly suggest, and they highly suggest, you tell your router to manually assign the IP, which isn't very hard. You just go to your router now, find the IP of this newly connected device, and manually assign it through the Dhcp server. Or if you're using Linode, it's set up automatically. It's pretty simple. So here we go, Upstream Dns Provider. This is actually quite important. In a future video, I'm going to set up a custom one. It's called Unbound. It's a recursive DNS server. You can customize it all you want, and it's actually amazing. I've gotten less than 0 millisecond DNS requests, but in this case we're just going to quad 9 filtered DNS Sec, which is secure DNS. Pretty simple. Here's a block list. You can add some, remove some later, but we're just going to go with the standard one to keep the speed. If you don't have V6, I recommend you get rid of V6, just speeds it up a little bit. And here's the important information. You want to keep that handy, as it comes in handy later. And here's just the IP address conflict, so just manually assign it, as mentioned before. So that's the V6, which doesn't affect me. You will want the web admin, you will want a web server, and well, it's up to you if you want to log the queries. I'm going to keep it on for debugging and show everything also for debugging. Actually, you know what, let's get it to hide domains and clients. That way, security. And there we go, supported OS. All good. This will take, it actually doesn't take very long. By the time I'm done explaining that it's amazing, it'll be done. So basically, you just need to set it up as a DNS on your router. So get that IP that you hopefully wrote down before, and if you're on your internal network, it'll be 192.whatever or 10.whatever. It's up to you. And there we go, done. Just grab this IP here, or the v6 if you so choose, and chuck that in your router or the individual device as the main DNS. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing that just yet because we still haven't checked that everything's all up to code. So the install is an etc Pi-hole, so if you have any issues, you can go there and edit things. Although it's pretty simple, straightforward. It just works. It's really simple. So I'll copy this and I'll open it, and we'll see here, admin. Now, that's just my HTTPS everywhere, so that won't come up for most people. So we're in. There's 0 queries, not a surprise. You try to log in. Oh, you need a password. This is where it's fun. You go back to your console, and you have this one here, but let's be honest, you don't want to type in 8 whatever it is every single time. So now we can actually run a couple of things. Pi-hole, and that'll tell you what you can do. There's plenty of things you can do. And in our case, I'll show another cool thing you can do. If you type in -A, so that's admin up here, and then -H for help, it'll show you all the options you get for that. So in my case, I'm going to set this to Celsius, and then I'm going to change the password to anything. If you're making it public facing, which I am in my case, although if this is on your whole network, I strongly suggest you do not make it public facing. Either way, set a secure password. It's just easier for everyone. So we'll also run a quick update, just in case there's anything. Usually isn't, but it's always good to check, because especially with Pi-hole, it's a DNS thing, you want the latest security. So that's all up to date, everything's good there. We can head back, and now you can try out our newly created password. And I'll hit remember me for 7 days. Not that I'll need this too often, but you very rarely really have to check in. So here we go. We have 4 requests, which will very likely be the device we're on, localhost. Yeah, not a surprise, client 00000. So it is the localhost. Because computers make queries, right? They want to check for updates and stuff. So that's not unsurprising to see a few things at the start, and there are 87,000 domains in the block list. Now here's a few of the basic settings. I won't go into an extensive list because it really is just what you want to do. Here's the whitelist. If you have a domain that's being blocked that you don't, you just check it in there. I recommend you do it as a wildcard, as in case there's a couple of subdomains. Blacklist, if you want to block something that isn't being blocked, you put that in there. And add lists. It's under group management, not sure why, but it is. Here's where you put addresses for add lists, for block lists. You can find a ton of them. People make GitHub repositories like nothing else with these things. They're just simple text files, usually, so we'll end in .txt. They're URLs because they're constantly changing. If a company realizes they're being blocked, they make a new domain and they chuck it in, and then someone finds it and puts it on the GitHub and they add it. And it's really great, but I found the default, this one's Stephen Black, it just works. It's not complicated. I've added a second one on one of my Pi-hole setups just as a check, because I don't want to have anything blocked that I want to use. So I always just have one as a temporary thing, and if you run into any issues, you just turn it off with this status button. Next thing we're going to go to is tools. Once you've changed your group management stuff, the ad list, you'll actually want to update Gravity. Pi-hole, Black hole, you want Gravity. It's pretty cool. I like the naming. So there you go. It just downloads them, uncompresses them, then applies them, so everything's back up and running. Here's the tailing the Pi-hole.log. This is the actual Pi-hole system itself. So the admin console, that's sort of the overhead. So if you get errors, that's one place to go. But if you're running into errors with services not working, internet services, you go to whatever website and it doesn't load, tailing the Pi-hole FTL log will show you the requests being made and whether or not they're being blocked, fulfilled, or if you've got DNS Sec enabled, which we'll do in a second, if they're marked as bogus. So you generally won't have to deal with that. And in case you're having issues and you want to check it on the subreddit or on the forum, you just generate the debug log. You get a little key. They even have a challenge. I'll send you a Raspberry Pi if you can end up hacking their debug log server. So neat little thing. So settings. This is the fun part. You'll want to write down a few things here. If you're using v6, you'll want to put that down, and v4, you'll want to put that down. Now, here's another button you'll probably use a little bit. It's restart the DNS Resolver, because in a future video, I'm going to show how to set up Unbound as a recursive DNS server and PiVPN. With Unbound, you'll restart the DNS Resolver. That way you don't have to wait for 3 minutes for it to boot up. Add list, it's going to tell you to go to the group management page. And DNS, here's the important part. Pi-hole just blocks DNS requests, or lets them through. It's more of a firewall. It's a middleman. It's not so much a DNS server as such. That's what Unbound does. So it forwards the requests to other servers to check if they work. So I would go with Quad 9 usually. It's a matter of taste. Some people use Google, DNS, whatever. You can even add custom up here, which is how you add Unbound, but we'll do that later on. I did Quad 9 because they seem, pretty privacy secure, although they did recently have to block some websites because of a lawsuit, so you might want to check on that. Anyway, DNS Sec, which is secure DNS, you can enable that down there. And there's also this thing called the Extended Client Subnet, which is this. It's basically, here it mentions, it may result in reduced privacy. It gets latency sensitive systems to work better. So if you're in, California, it'll hook you up, the DNS server will send you to the California server instead of the UK server. Now here's where, if you're running this at home in the local network, you just want to keep it in the home network, this should be fine. It's on only ETH0. But in my case, I'm running a public one. I'm doing this so I don't have to fiddle with VPNs, and at any computer I walk up to, I can just punch this DNS server in, and away we go with ad blocking. So I'm going to do listen on all interfaces, permit all origins. You will want to, check that everything's all good. They do mention here, do not port forward it. If you really, really want to, you can, but 5.3 is the DNS port, and I believe it's UDP and TCP. I'm not quite sure. Some requests are, some requests aren't, although I believe it is mostly UDP. So that's pretty cut and paste. V6 you can enable if you want. I'm not going to use V6, that's an issue. Dhcp, this is if for some reason you can't set or change the DNS server on your Wi-Fi router, you can set DHCP, and the Pi-hole will deal with the handing out IP addresses. Here's the API, which is actually pretty cool, I should mention. I'm not going to show the token, that would be bad. I have it set up at home where if there is an issue with a website, which you'll run into a few, some services won't work for some times, and you can fiddle with the FTL log and whatnot, but sometimes it's just easier to tell the Google Home to stop it. So you can actually set up, I figured out a way with if this then that, and a few other services. If I tell it to disable Pi-hole, it sends a webhook to this IP address, with my API key to authenticate it, saying disable for 5 minutes, and it's super convenient too. It just works. I love it. So that's really helpful. Here you go. You can set that to Celsius or whatever. You can set local DNS here if you so choose. I haven't really fiddled with that. I haven't had a need to. But anyway, this should be working now, but you won't be getting many requests because nothing's pointed to it. So you can point to it now, but if you want to be really careful and not disturb anyone, you can actually perform a few requests beforehand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to settings, I'm going to copy this IP. You don't need the /24, that just tells it subnet's 255.255.255.0. There's 254 available IPs. That's an entire other subject, that's like Nmap level stuff. But just open up another terminal, make sure you're not in the SSH one. So I'm in definitely not Arch Linux, which it definitely isn't, it's Debian 11. But here you can really simply just type dig at and then copy that IP and google.com. Perfect, we got status of no error, we got an answer, and most importantly we got an actual valid answer that isn't gibberish. So that's Google's IP. You punch that into your browser, will pull up that Google. Actually, Google has a few, you'll probably get a few different answers eventually. But now here's the ad blocking part you want to check. So we'll do dig, and there's a whole ton of domains, but in this case a pretty good one is just www.googleadservices.com. We got no error, and we got an answer, but the answer was 000, which is completely useless. I believe that just means it's a local bind address, so it's not an issue. So 19 milliseconds to do that, 15 milliseconds to do that. Keep in mind I'm hosting this on a remote server pretty far away, so 15 milliseconds isn't bad at all. If you host it at home, that should be like 5 or 10. There is a limit to it though. It does get to a point where it doesn't get any faster, but Unbound can actually help with that because it's your own DNS server. You can have your own self-sufficient internet, really. If the DNS servers go down, you still get half an hour or so of stuff. It's quite helpful. So that's a future video. We'll set that up. But now if we go back to good old Chrome and go back to the dashboard, there should be more than 4 requests. Look at that, 11. Now if you have show everything, you'll see the names of the devices doing the requests, where they're going and stuff, but I don't because privacy is key. So the block list blocked 27%, cache 18.2, so if you've said google.ca, it's going to remember google.com, google.whatever, it's going to remember the domain for a bit. I believe it remembers it for as long as it's TTL, it's time to alive. And here is, very importantly, DNS.quad9, so it's quad 9, it's where it forwards it if it doesn't know where it should go. And then that is, really don't know what that is, but it doesn't matter. I think because I'm hosting it on Linode, it's got its own DNS system. If you see a few things out of the ordinary, there's probably a reasonable explanation for it, but this is actually really helpful for tracking queries in and out of the house, in and out of the network, because you can see if something malicious is up, because, oh, I didn't go to this website, but it could be the fact that malware is sending something to someone else and getting the DNS query. So that's the basic Pi-hole. You just point your router to it and it should be up and running, no problem. In the future, I'll show how to set up Unbound, which is, again, a recursive DNS server. It is amazing. It can bring your resolve time to less than a millisecond. It is incredible. It logs, it caches everything. It's just, mwah, it's perfect, and it fits in beautifully with Pi-hole. Not too much setup. It's a little bit tricky depending on your setup, but once you get it through. And in a future video, I'll show how to use PiVPN, which is even better, because you can automatically set up PiVPN to use Pi-hole as the main DNS server, which means you can get Pi-hole blocking on the go, which is really helpful if you're on public internet. You get A, secure Wi-Fi, or secure internet, sorry, and B, you get ad-free browsing, which is always amazing. So thank you very much for watching. If you would consider subscribing, that's great. And hopefully check back for the Unbound video and the PiVPN, because I'm actually excited to make these. Have a great day.